My name is Bridget Carlson. I was 32 years old when my father threw my 8-year-old daughter into a thunderstorm. 3 hours. That's how long my daughter sat in a storm drain before someone found her. 3 hours of rain hitting her face, of wind tearing through her jacket, of thunder shaking the concrete under her body. She was 8. She weighed 54 pounds. And my father opened the door and pushed her out like she was a stray dog who'd knocked over the trash. He did it because of a lie. A lie told by her 10-year-old cousin. A lie my parents never questioned. Not for 1 second. Because questioning it would have meant admitting the truth about who they'd been protecting all along. What happened in that hospital room 3 hours later, and what my father said when he saw me sitting by her bed, changed everything. But what none of them knew was that I had already made the call that would end their world as they knew it. If this story speaks to you, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I joined the Army at 18, not because I loved the idea of uniforms and salutes, but because it was the only door my father couldn't close. Walt Carlson had a very clear picture of what his daughter should be. Married young, close to home, grateful for everything he provided, and quiet about everything he didn't. My sister, Renee, fit that picture perfectly. She married Craig Malone at 21, had Bryce at 22, and moved into a house 10 minutes from my parents. My father smiled at her wedding like he'd just won the lottery. I chose ROTC, then Officer Candidate School, then a logistics commission out of Fort Riley, Kansas. Every step I took further from home, my father's silence got louder. By the time I was 24, I was a first lieutenant managing supply chains for a brigade. By the time I was 25, I was pregnant. The father, a civilian contractor named Trent, left when I was 6 months along. No forwarding address, no phone call, just an empty apartment and a note that said, "I'm not ready." I had Ivy alone, raised her on base housing and meal plans and every scrap of leave I could scrape together. My mother called once a week. My father called once a month, and when they did, the question was always the same. "When are you coming home, Bridget?" I never answered that question the way they wanted, but I always answered Ivy's. "Where are we going next, Mommy?" "Wherever the Army sends us, baby, and we'll make it work." I was good at making things work. I was not good at seeing what was happening when I wasn't there to watch. When I got orders for a 9-month rotation in Qatar, I had 72 hours to finalize my family care plan. Every military parent knows that form. It's Department of Defense standard. You designate a caregiver. You sign custody paperwork. You leave your child with someone you trust, and you fly halfway around the world hoping you made the right choice. My parents volunteered before I asked. My mother called the morning after I told her about the deployment. "She's our granddaughter. Of course we'll take her." I remember feeling relieved. Ivy would be in a house with a yard, a school district rated 9 out of 10, and 2 grandparents who had raised 2 kids of their own. The alternative was my Army buddy's wife, a woman Ivy had met twice. The choice felt obvious. I signed the family care plan designating Walt and Diane Carlson as Ivy's temporary legal guardians. I set up an automatic transfer of $1,350 a month into their checking account. Child care, groceries, school supplies. My father never mentioned the money, not once. And I later found out he never told Renee either. Renee's son Bryce was already practically living at my parents' house. He had a bedroom there, a toothbrush in the bathroom, a drawer full of clothes. When Ivy arrived with her suitcase, my mother put her in the guest room, the one with the pull-out couch and no curtains. Bryce had a room with baseball posters and a nightlight shaped like a rocket. Ivy had a couch that folded. I didn't know that then. Ivy didn't tell me. And when I asked my mother if Ivy was settled, she said, "She's adjusting just fine." That was the first lie. It wouldn't be the last. The night before I deployed, I sat on Ivy's bed in our base housing apartment and pulled a small card from my pocket. Military dependent ID, her photo on the front, my name printed underneath, emergency contact number on the back. I clipped it to the inside pocket of her backpack. "What's that for?" she asked. "This tells anyone who finds you that you belong to me. No matter where I am, no matter how far, you show someone this card and they will call your mom, even if you're in another country." She ran her fingers over the plastic. Then she was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that should have stopped me cold. "What if Grandpa gets mad again?" Again, I set down the water bottle I was packing and looked at her. "What do you mean again?" She picked at the edge of her blanket. "Nothing, he just gets loud sometimes." "Loud how?" "Like when Bryce breaks something and Grandpa thinks I did it. He yells, but then Grandma says it's fine." I knelt in front of her. "Has Grandpa ever scared you?" She shrugged. An 8-year-old shrug. The kind that means yes but doesn't have the vocabulary for it yet. I filed it away. Told myself I'd watch more carefully from overseas. Told myself I'd ask my mother about it. Told myself that my father was strict, not dangerous, and that Ivy was safe. I was wrong about one of those things. And by the time I figured out which one, my daughter was in a storm drain 5 blocks from my parents' house. I kissed her forehead. "I'll call you every week. I promise." I kept that promise. My parents didn't keep theirs. Qatar was hot, flat, and 8 hours ahead of Kansas. My work days ran 12 to 14 hours managing supply routes for 3 forward operating bases. I scheduled my video calls for 6 in the morning local time, 10 p.m. back home, because that was Ivy's bedtime window, and I insisted on it despite the odd hour for me. Except the calls never happened when I hoped. My mother insisted on hosting them from the kitchen. Better Wi-Fi, she said, but the real reason became clear after the second week. Diane was always in the frame, hovering behind Ivy, adjusting the camera angle, smiling. "How's school, baby?" "Fine. What did you do today?" "Stuff." "Are you and Bryce getting along?" Pause. "I don't know." She used to talk for 20 minutes straight, about the caterpillar she found, about the girl in her class who could burp the alphabet, about the bird that landed on the playground fence. Now she gave me single-word answers and looked past the camera like she was waiting for permission to leave. I tried asking my mother directly. "Is something going on with Ivy? She seems different." Diane waved her hand. "She's adjusting. All kids do this when their routine changes. She just needs time. Can I talk to her alone next time without you in the room? The Wi-Fi is better in the kitchen, Bridget. You know that." I didn't push it. I should have. 2 weeks later, I noticed something else. Ivy stopped mentioning Bryce by name. Used to be Bryce and I played in the yard, or Bryce showed me his baseball cards. Now it was just silence when I asked. "You and Bryce doing okay?" She looked down. "Yeah. You sure? Can I go now, Mom? Grandma says lunch is ready." I let her go. I shouldn't have. The care package arrived on a Tuesday. Brown cardboard box, stamped slightly crooked. My mother's handwriting on the label. Inside, 2 bags of Ivy's favorite gummy bears, a photo of Ivy at a school event, and a folded piece of construction paper. I opened the drawing. Stick figures. Left side of the page, a tall man, a woman with curly hair, a smaller woman holding hands with a boy, all grouped together, smiling, bright crayon colors, red, yellow, blue. Right side, one figure, small, no smile, brown hair, standing alone, no one touching her. At the bottom, in careful child handwriting, "My family." I sat on my bunk and stared at it for a long time. My daughter drew herself outside her own family. I called home immediately. My father answered. His voice carried that edge it always had when I called during his evening shows. "Is Ivy there?" "She's upstairs. What do you want?" I got a drawing from her. She drew the family and she put herself off to the side alone. Silence, then a grunt. "Kids draw nonsense, Bridget. Don't read into everything." She drew everyone else holding hands. She drew herself standing by herself. "She's fine. Your mother takes good care of her. Maybe if you were here instead of playing soldier across the ocean, your daughter wouldn't draw sad pictures." He hung up. I pulled out a small notebook I kept in my foot locker, the kind with the hard green cover and the elastic band. I wrote the date. I wrote what he said. I wrote what the drawing showed. Then I folded the drawing and slipped it into the breast pocket of my uniform. It stayed there for 4 months, against my chest, against my heart. I started paying attention to the details I'd been missing. Small things, things that added up. Ivy's school had an online portal, parent access. I could see attendance records, teacher notes, after-school pickup logs. I checked every morning before my shift. Bryce Malone, picked up by Walt Carlson every day at 3:15. Car pickup lane like clockwork. Ivy Carlson, enrolled in after-school program, pickup at 5:30. Different parent listed for emergency contact, my mother, not my father. He didn't even put his name on her file. I called the school office. The receptionist was kind. "Ivy is doing well academically. She's quiet, though, very quiet. Does someone pick her up?" "She's in the extended day program. Her grandmother picks her up around 5:30, sometimes closer to 6. Bryce left at 3:15. Ivy waited 2 more hours every day. Bryce's birthday in October. I saw photos on Renee's social media. 18 kids, bounce house in the backyard, cake shaped like a baseball diamond, my parents grinning behind a table of presents they'd paid for. Ivy's birthday in January. My mother texted me a single photo. Ivy at the kitchen table, a store-bought cake, no candles, no friends, just my mother standing behind her and a paper plate with a slice of yellow cake. I called my mother that night. Why was Ivy's birthday so different from Bryce's? We already spent a lot this month, Bridget, and Ivy didn't want a big party. She's 8. What 8-year-old doesn't want a party? Bryce lives here full-time. Ivy is temporary. Temporary. She used that word like it was a fact, not a knife. But it cut just the same. And I knew right then that in my parents' house, my daughter was a guest. Bryce was the grandchild. I sat down at the comm station at 300 and typed a hardship reassignment request. 2 pages, single-spaced, facts only. Military regulation allows early return when family care plan conditions change materially. I cited documented concerns about my designated caregiver's treatment of my dependent child. I attached the school counselor's contact information, the pickup log discrepancy, and a scanned copy of Ivy's drawing. My commander, Colonel Whitfield, read it the next day. He called me into his office, sat me down, and said, "Carlson, is your daughter safe?" "I don't know, sir, and that's the problem." He signed the request that afternoon and sent it up the chain. Then I called Captain Alina Marsh, JAG. We'd served together at Fort Sill 3 years earlier. She was stationed at Riley and she owed me a favor for covering her supply audit when her kid got sick. "Marsh, I need legal advice, off the record for now. Talk to me. My parents are my designated caregivers for Ivy. I think there's favoritism, maybe neglect. I need to know my options." She didn't hesitate. "Document everything. Screenshots, school reports, dates. If this goes legal, you want a paper trail that starts before the incident, not after." "There hasn't been an incident." "Then you're ahead of the curve, stay there." I spent the next 2 months building a file. Every phone call logged, every drawing scanned, every text from my mother saved to a folder on my laptop labeled family. I didn't tell my parents I was seeking early return. I didn't tell Renee. I didn't tell anyone except Marsh and Colonel Whitfield. 2 months of paperwork, 2 months of waiting. And then 3 weeks before my reassignment came through, Bryce told the lie that changed everything. I trusted my parents with the most important person in my life. And for 2 years, I missed the signs that my daughter was becoming invisible in her own family. If you have ever felt that gut feeling that something was wrong but couldn't prove it, stay with me. Drop a comment and let's keep going. Bryce Malone had been lying about Ivy for months. I just didn't have the full picture until later. The first lie was small, a broken television remote. Bryce threw it at the wall during a tantrum over a video game. When Walt stormed into the living room, Bryce pointed at Ivy. "She dropped it." Ivy said she didn't. Walt told her to stop making excuses and sent her to her room. The second lie was about cookies. My mother baked a batch of snickerdoodles for Bryce's classroom party. Half the tray disappeared overnight. Bryce told Diane that Ivy ate them after dinner. The truth was Bryce had given them to his friend from across the street. My mother never asked Ivy her side. She just said, "You need to learn some self-control." The third lie was worse. Bryce told his teacher that Ivy had called him a name at recess. The teacher separated them for a week. When the school counselor looked into it, no witnesses could confirm Bryce's story. But the separation had already happened, and Ivy spent that week eating lunch alone. Each time the same pattern. Bryce spoke. Adults believed. Ivy denied. Adults dismissed. My mother once told Ivy, "Don't be a tattletale. Nobody likes a child who makes up stories." Ivy stopped telling anyone anything. She drew instead. I learned about most of this from the school counselor, Mrs. Sandoval, who had been meeting with Ivy once a week since November. Ivy trusted her because Sandoval never interrupted her drawings. She just sat and waited. Sandoval told me later, "Your daughter doesn't talk much, but her drawings say everything." Walt's rule was simple and absolute. Bryce didn't lie, and anyone who said otherwise was the problem. My mother had a pearl necklace that she treated like it was made of moonlight. It belonged to her mother, and before that, her grandmother. 3 generations of Carlson women had worn it at their weddings, their christenings, their milestone birthdays. My mother kept it in a small velvet box on her dresser and took it out every Sunday before church. One Sunday in February, during a family dinner I wasn't present for, my mother lifted the velvet box from the dresser and brought it to the table. She opened it in front of Bryce. "This was your great-grandmother's," she said. "Someday when you're older, I'll pass it down to you." Bryce's eyes went wide. He reached for it and Diane let him hold it. She watched him turn the pearls over in his small fingers and she smiled like she was watching a sacred tradition unfold. Ivy, sitting across the table, asked quietly, "Can I hold it too?" My mother didn't look at her. "Not right now, sweetheart, you might drop it." Bryce smirked. Ivy put her hands in her lap. Renee, sitting beside Bryce, leaned toward my mother and said just loud enough for Ivy to hear, "You know Ivy's clumsy. Remember the vase?" The vase, a ceramic vase Bryce had knocked off the shelf while roughhousing. He told my parents Ivy bumped it. They believed him. My mother spent the rest of that evening reminding Ivy to be more careful with other people's things. After dinner, Ivy went to the guest room. She sat at her desk and drew. She didn't come out until my mother called her for her bath. Nobody checked on her. Nobody asked what she was drawing. Nobody noticed she had gone quiet again. Mrs. Sandoval called me on a Saturday morning, 5 in the afternoon her time. I was eating dinner in the mess hall when my personal phone buzzed with a Kansas number I didn't recognize. Lieutenant Carlson, this is Grace Sandoval. I'm the counselor at Ashgrove Elementary. I work with Ivy. I stepped outside. The wind was hot and smelled like diesel. Is she okay? Physically, yes. But I wanted to talk to you about some patterns I've been seeing. She told me Ivy had been increasingly withdrawn since January. She no longer played with other children at recess. She sat in the corner of the cafeteria and drew. She flinched when adults raised their voices near her. Then Sandoval told me something that made me grip the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. She told me her grandfather says she's not a real Carlson. I closed my eyes. The heat pressed against my face. He said that, those were her exact words. She said he told her that real Carlsons don't steal and don't lie. Not a real Carlson. My father said that to me the day I told him I was enlisting. He stood in the kitchen of the house I grew up in and said, real Carlsons stay with their family. You're walking out on everything. Now he was saying it to my daughter, 8 years old, 54 pounds, and he was telling her she didn't belong. Sandoval continued, I'm not required to file a formal report yet, but I wanted you to be aware. Thank you. Can you email me your session notes? I can send them to your military email by Monday. I hung up, forwarded the voicemail to Marsh, and added 3 lines to the green notebook. My father had learned nothing, and my daughter was learning all the wrong things. I called Renee the next day. I told myself it would be a sister-to-sister conversation. Calm, honest, 2 mothers talking about what was best for the kids. It lasted 4 minutes. Is Ivy doing okay at Mom and Dad's? Her school counselor says she's been withdrawn. Renee sighed, the kind of sigh that was loud enough to make sure I heard it. She's fine, Bridget. She just needs to learn her place. Bryce has been here longer. He knows the routine. She needs to learn her place. I let those words sit in my ear for a full 3 seconds before I trusted myself to respond. What does that mean, Renee? Learn her place. It means your daughter walks around that house like she's a guest instead of pitching in. Bryce helps Dad in the garage. Bryce sets the table without being asked. Ivy sits in her room and draws. She's 8. Bryce was doing chores at 8. Bryce has 2 parents and a bedroom with a nightlight. Ivy has a pull-out couch. Silence. Then Renee said the thing I wasn't prepared for. I told Mom and Dad that maybe you should just let them adopt Ivy. You're never here anyway. She needs stability, Bridget. She needs a real family environment. My throat tightened. Not from sadness, from the effort of keeping my voice even. Adopt my daughter. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. I hung up without another word, opened my laptop, pulled up the Army Legal Assistance portal, started drafting notes for a formal custody review. My sister wanted my parents to adopt my child. She'd said it out loud like it was a reasonable suggestion, like my motherhood was a lease she thought had expired. I decided that night that when I came home, I was coming home armed. Not with weapons. With paperwork, 3 weeks later, the reassignment came through. I was going home. Colonel Whitfield handed me the paperwork in his office with a look that was half relief and half concern. Carlson, whatever's going on, handle it. Your kid needs you more than logistics does. I packed my footlocker in 40 minutes. Green notebook, laptop, phone charger, Ivy's drawing in my breast pocket. Everything else was Army issue and could stay. My flight left Qatar at 600, 15 hours of turbulence and layovers. I landed at Wichita Mid-Continent Airport at 2 in the afternoon Central Time. Rented a car with my military ID. Drove to a Holiday Inn 12 minutes from my parents' house. I did not call them. I did not drive by their house. I sat on the hotel bed with my phone in my hand and called Marsh. I'm stateside, landed 2 hours ago. Good. Your family care plan revocation request is drafted. I can file it first thing Monday morning. What happens after you file? Your parents lose designated caregiver status. Legal guardianship reverts to you immediately. If they refuse to return Ivy, we go to family court. And if something happens before Monday, then you call 911 and you call me, in that order. I sat in the hotel room that night and stared at the ceiling. 9 hours until morning. 9 hours until paperwork. 9 hours of trusting that nothing would go wrong. But I didn't have 9 hours because the storm came that night. Here is what happened in my parents' house that evening. I learned the details later from Bryce's interview, from Mrs. Ferris, from my mother's own tearful confession. Around 8:30, my mother went upstairs to put on her necklace for the next morning's church outfit. She opened the velvet box on her dresser. Empty. She searched the bedroom, then the bathroom, then the hallway. Then she went downstairs and started pulling open drawers in the kitchen, the living room, the front closet. "Walt, my necklace is gone. I can't find it anywhere." My father stood up from his recliner. "What do you mean gone? It's not in the box. It's not on the dresser. I've looked everywhere." Bryce was in the living room. He watched the panic build for about 90 seconds. Then he walked to my father. "Grandpa, I saw Ivy put something in her backpack earlier after school. She was being sneaky about it." My father didn't ask a follow-up question. He didn't ask Bryce what exactly he saw or when exactly it happened. He walked straight to the guest room, grabbed Ivy's backpack from the floor, and unzipped it. The pearl necklace was inside. Bryce had placed it there that afternoon while Ivy was upstairs doing homework. He'd taken it from the velvet box, walked it to the guest room, and slipped it into the front pocket of her bag. Then he'd zipped it closed and gone back to the television. He was 10 years old. He knew exactly what would happen. My father's face turned a shade of red I'd only seen once before, the day I told him I was joining the army. "Ivy, get down here now." She came down the stairs in her pajamas, bare feet on the hardwood, hands at her sides. She had no idea what was coming. The storm had been building since sundown. By 8:45, the rain was sideways. Wind gusts shook the gutters and sent branches scraping across the roof. A March thunderstorm in Kansas, the kind that turns streets into rivers and knocks out power lines. Inside the house, my father held up the pearl necklace in one hand and Ivy's backpack in the other. "You stole this from your grandmother's dresser." "I didn't, Grandpa. I didn't take it. It was in your bag. I don't know how it got there." He threw the backpack on the floor. 2 years I've put up with this. 2 years of your attitude. You're lying. You're sneaking around." My mother stood behind him, clutching the necklace against her chest. She said nothing. She didn't defend Ivy. She didn't ask questions. Renee arrived 10 minutes later. My parents had called her. She walked in, saw Ivy sitting on the bottom stair, and crossed her arms. "This is what happens when a child doesn't have structure. I've been saying it for months." Bryce stood in the living room doorway. He didn't speak. He picked at his fingernails and watched. My father leaned over Ivy. "You have anything to say for yourself?" "I didn't do it, Grandpa." He straightened up, looked at my mother, looked at Renee, then looked back at Ivy. "Bryce said he saw you. Your grandmother is heartbroken and you're sitting here lying to my face." Thunder cracked outside. The kitchen window rattled. Ivy pressed her back against the stair railing. She held her knees to her chest. She didn't cry. She just went very, very still. The kind of still that 8-year-olds learn when the adults around them have become unpredictable. And then my father said the words that put my daughter in the hospital. He stood over her on the stairs, Renee behind his right shoulder, my mother behind his left. "I've had enough of you." His voice filled the hallway like it owned the walls. 2 years of your behavior, the lying, the attitude, the stealing. "I didn't steal anything, Grandpa." "Bryce doesn't lie." It came out of his mouth the way scripture comes out of a preacher. Absolute, final, unquestionable. Bryce doesn't lie. The sun rises in the east, water is wet, and Bryce doesn't lie. My mother touched my father's arm. "Walt, maybe we should." He pulled his arm away. "No, I'm done. She needs to learn what happens when she disrespects this family." Renee, from behind, "Dad's right. This has gone on way too far." Bryce, still in the doorway, said nothing. He pressed his back against the frame and picked at the skin around his thumbnail. A nervous habit, the kind a 10-year-old develops when the lie he told is growing bigger than he planned. My father reached down and grabbed Ivy's backpack from the floor, shoved it into her lap. "You want to act like you don't belong here? Fine." Ivy looked at him. Then she looked past him at my mother. Diane's eyes were wet, but her mouth was a flat line. She didn't move, didn't reach for Ivy, didn't step between them. Then Ivy looked at Renee. Renee uncrossed her arms long enough to check her phone. My daughter looked at every adult in that hallway, and not a single one of them looked back. My father walked to the front door. The sound of rain filled the house the second he turned the handle. Wind pushed the door open wider than he meant it to. He didn't close it. He just pointed. "Get out! I don't need a lying granddaughter." Those words left his mouth at 8:47 on a Thursday evening in March. The rain was falling so hard it bounced off the porch steps. The wind had already knocked a branch off the maple tree in the front yard. The temperature had dropped 16 degrees in the last 2 hours. Ivy stood up from the stairs. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She picked up her backpack, slipped her arms through the straps, and walked to the door. She was wearing pajamas, cotton pants with little stars on them, a long-sleeve shirt that said Future Scientist. No shoes, no jacket, no phone. She stepped through the doorway and the rain hit her immediately. Within seconds, her hair was flat against her face. My father slammed the door behind her. Next door, Mrs. Ferris was rinsing her dinner plate when she heard the slam. She looked through her kitchen window and saw a small figure walking down the sidewalk in the rain, in pajamas, bare feet slapping wet concrete. She picked up her phone. 911. There's a child walking alone outside in this storm. She just came out of the house next door. Inside my parents' house, my mother sat down at the kitchen table. She held the pearl necklace in both hands and stared at it. Walt, maybe we should let her back in. She'll catch a cold. She'll come back when she's ready to apologize. Renee put on her coat. I need to get home before the roads get bad. Bryce, let's go. Bryce didn't move right away. He stood in the doorway looking at the closed front door. He stayed there for about 5 seconds. Then he followed his mother to the garage. Nobody went after Ivy. Nobody checked the porch. Nobody looked out the window. My daughter walked 5 blocks in a thunderstorm before she found a storm drain large enough to crawl into. She sat inside it, hugging her knees, her backpack over her head, until the blue and red lights found her. The police officer who found her was named Munoz. Patrol unit responding to Mrs. Ferris's call. He drove the route 3 times before his flashlight caught the glint of a backpack reflector inside a concrete drainage opening 5 blocks from my parents' house. Ivy was shaking so hard she couldn't speak. Her feet were bleeding from running barefoot on asphalt. Her lips were blue. She held her backpack against her chest like a shield. Munoz wrapped her in a thermal blanket from his trunk and radioed for an ambulance. EMTs arrived in 9 minutes. They transported her to Riverside General. Mild hypothermia, scrapes on both knees and the soles of both feet, dehydrated, heart rate elevated. Not critical, but not okay. At the hospital, a nurse checked Ivy's backpack for identification. Inside the front pocket, tucked into the same slot where Bryce had planted the pearl necklace, she found a small plastic card. Military Dependent ID, Ivy Carlson, emergency contact First Lieutenant Bridget Carlson. The nurse dialed the number at 9:31. I was sitting on my hotel bed 12 minutes away, staring at the ceiling, counting the hours until Marsh could file the revocation paperwork, when my phone rang with a local number. This is Riverside General Hospital. We have your daughter, Ivy Carlson. She was brought in by police about 20 minutes ago. I was in my car before the nurse finished explaining. I drove 11 minutes in the rain, parked crooked in the emergency lot, ran through the sliding doors. A nurse pointed me down the hall. Room 4. Ivy in a hospital bed, IV drip in her left arm, monitors beeping, her hair still damp, her eyes closed. I sat down beside her, took her hand. I'm here, I'm not leaving. Her eyes opened. Mommy. Yeah, baby, I'm right here. In her other hand, crumpled against her palm, was a drawing. 2 stick figures, one small, one in green, holding hands. 20 minutes later, a woman in a gray cardigan and glasses knocked on the open door, badge on a lanyard, clipboard under her arm. I'm Nancy Ackhaffer, hospital social worker. Do you have a moment? I didn't let go of Ivy's hand. Come in. She pulled a chair to the foot of the bed and sat down. Professional, careful. The kind of careful that meant she'd done this before and knew how it went. I'm required by law to file a report with Child Protective Services. An 8-year-old was admitted tonight with exposure injuries and no legal guardian present at the time of incident. I understand. Can you tell me your relationship to the patient? I'm her mother, Bridget Carlson, First Lieutenant, United States Army, currently stationed at Fort Riley. I handed her my military ID. She copied the information onto her form. Who was responsible for Ivy this evening? My parents, Walt and Diane Carlson. They're her designated caregivers under my military family care plan. Was she sent out of the house? I believe so. The neighbor who called 911, her name is Louise Ferris. She lives next door. She can confirm what she saw. Nancy wrote for a full minute without looking up. Then she said, CPS will open an investigation within 24 hours. An investigator will contact the caregivers and conduct interviews. I understand. Looked at me over her glasses. Is there anything else you want me to know? My daughter has been living with my parents for just over a year. I have documentation of ongoing concerns. School counselor reports, behavioral observations, communication logs. I can provide all of it. Please do. After she left, I called Marsh. It's happening. CPS is filing tonight. I'm driving to Riley now. I'll be there by morning. I didn't make a single accusation. I just answered her questions. The system moved on its own. 1 hour and 12 minutes after I arrived at the hospital, the door to room 4 opened again. My father walked in. He saw Ivy first. Small body in a hospital bed, IV tube running to her arm, monitors blinking green. Her pajamas had been replaced with a hospital gown 2 sizes too big. The color left his face like someone pulled a plug. Then he turned and saw me sitting in the chair beside the bed, still wearing my army jacket, the one with my name stitched over the left pocket. His hands started shaking. Both of them, fingers trembling against his thighs like he was trying to hold something that kept slipping. You can't be here. How did you get here? I've been here for an hour, Dad. You're supposed to be overseas, you're deployed. I came back early. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. My mother came in behind him. She saw Ivy and her hand flew to her mouth. Then she saw me and she started crying instantly. The kind of crying that already had words loaded behind it. If you'd been here, none of this would have happened. I looked at her, held her gaze. I trusted you to be here for her, Mom. My father tried to regain footing. The girl stole your mother's necklace. No, she didn't. Bryce is 10 years old and we're not going to have this conversation in a hospital room. A nurse appeared in the doorway. I need to ask the visitors to keep their voices down, please. I stood up. Not fast, not aggressive, just stood. Dad, Mom, I think you should leave. CPS will be contacting you tomorrow. My father's face shifted from pale to red in 2 seconds. CPS? You called CPS on your own parents. The hospital did, because that's what happens when an 8-year-old ends up in the emergency room during a thunderstorm with no guardian. He opened his mouth to argue. I waited. He closed it. They left without another word. My mother's crying echoed down the hallway long after the elevator doors closed. The hospital went quiet after midnight. Fluorescent lights dimmed to a low hum. Shoes squeaked on linoleum. Someone's monitor beeped down the hall in a slow, patient rhythm. I pulled my chair closer to Ivy's bed and rested my elbows on the railing. She woke up around 1 in the morning. Her eyes opened slowly. She looked at me like she wasn't sure I was real. Am I in trouble? No, baby, you are never in trouble for telling the truth. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, in a voice so small it barely reached the pillow, Bryce put the necklace in my bag. I saw him do it after school. He went into the guest room when he thought I was upstairs, but I was on the stairs. I saw. Why didn't you tell Grandpa? Because Grandpa wouldn't listen. He never listens when it's about Bryce. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. It was still damp at the roots. I know, and I'm going to make sure the right people listen this time. She closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. Her grip on my hand loosened but didn't let go. I sat in the dark for a long time after that, listening to the monitors, watching the IV drip count seconds. Then I opened my phone and typed an email to Marsh. Subject line, Evidence Package, CPS Investigation, Carlson. I attached the school counselor's session notes, the scanned drawings, Mrs. Ferris's phone number, and a summary of our conversation, the hospital intake form the nurse had given me, my family care plan documentation, every screenshot, every log entry, every line from the green notebook. I had spent 2 years trusting the wrong people with my daughter. That night, sitting in that hospital chair, I started trusting the right ones. 72 hours later, my parents walked into a room they never expected to see. My daughter was in a hospital bed because the people I trusted most threw her into a storm. I did not scream. I did not threaten. I let the system do what it was built to do. If you know what it's like to stay calm when everything inside you wants to break, this next part is for you. Keep watching. Ms. Ferreira arrived at my parents' house on Monday morning at 9:15. CPS investigator, 14 years on the job, short hair, no-nonsense posture, a leather portfolio thick with forms. She interviewed Walt and Diane separately. Standard protocol. My father's version. The girl was acting out. I told her to sit on the porch and think about what she'd done. She ran off on her own. My mother's version. Walt was upset. She went outside for some air. I thought she'd come right back in. Ferreira wrote both statements down. Then she noted the discrepancy. He said he told her to sit on the porch. She said Ivy went outside for air. One was an order, the other was a choice. They couldn't both be true. Next, Ferreira interviewed Mrs. Ferris at her kitchen table. Louise had her own notes. She'd been writing things down since November, times and dates and what she heard through the shared wall between the houses. He opened the front door, Mrs. Ferris said. He pushed the child's backpack at her. She was in her pajamas, no shoes. He told her to get out. Ferreira looked up from her notebook. Those were his exact words. He said, "Get out, I don't need a lying granddaughter." Then he slammed the door. I called 911 within 30 seconds. Ferreira wrote the quote in block letters, underlined it. That sentence, cold and short and final, went into the official CPS file, not as hearsay, not as allegation, as a direct witness statement from a 70-year-old woman with no motive to lie and a clear view from her kitchen window. My father had spent 61 years controlling the narrative inside his house. He didn't know that the walls were thinner than he thought. The child specialist assigned to Bryce's interview was named Dr. Wren. Young patient trained in forensic interview techniques for minors. Renee was present in the room per protocol but was instructed not to coach or interrupt. Bryce sat across a small table with a cup of juice and a stress ball. "Bryce, can you tell me what happened with the necklace? I saw Ivy put it in her backpack. What time was that? After school. Where were you when you saw her? In the kitchen. Where was Ivy? In the hallway. Can you see the hallway from the kitchen?" Bryce paused. "I mean, I was in the hallway too." "Were you in the kitchen or the hallway?" He squeezed the stress ball. "The living room, I saw her from the living room." 3 locations in 30 seconds. Wren didn't point it out. She just wrote, "Bryce, sometimes kids feel pressure to say things because they're scared or because someone told them to. It's okay to tell the truth here. Nothing bad will happen to you." Bryce looked at his mother. Renee's face was stone. I put it in her bag." Renee's voice cut in immediately. "He's confused. He doesn't know what he's saying." "Ma'am, please let Bryce finish." Bryce stared at the stress ball. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom told me Ivy needs to learn her place. She said if Ivy got in trouble, Grandpa would send her away and things would go back to normal." Renee stood up. Bryce didn't look at her. The room went very quiet. Ferreira conducted Renee's interview in a separate room. By then she had Bryce's statement, Mrs. Ferris's account, and the documented history from the school counselor. "Mrs. Malone, did you instruct your son to place the necklace in Ivy's backpack?" Renee's jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous. Bryce is 10. He makes things up. Your son stated that you told him Ivy needs to learn her place. He also stated that you said if Ivy got in trouble, your father would send her away. He's a child. You're going to believe a child over me." Ferreira set her pen down and looked at Renee without blinking. "Ma'am, I believed a child's lie when it put an 8-year-old in the hospital. So yes, I take children's statements seriously." Renee pushed her chair back. "I'm calling my lawyer." "That's your right. This investigation will proceed regardless." Ferreira placed the pearl necklace on the table in a clear evidence bag. It had been recovered from Ivy's backpack at the hospital and catalogued by the responding officer. This necklace was planted in an 8-year-old girl's bag by a 10-year-old boy who was told to do so by his mother. The result was a child being expelled from her home during a severe thunderstorm without shoes, without a jacket, and without supervision. She spent 3 hours alone in a storm drain. Renee stared at the necklace. The pearls caught the overhead light. They looked smaller under fluorescence than they ever did on my mother's dresser. She didn't say another word. She picked up her phone and left the room. The supervised meeting took place at the CPS county office on Wednesday afternoon. A rectangular table, overhead fluorescent lights, a recording device in the center. On one side, my parents, my father in a button-down he'd ironed himself, my mother in the cardigan she wore to church. Their lawyer, a man named Dunbar, sat between them. On the other side, me, Captain Marsh in her dress uniform, my documentation in a manila folder. At the head of the table, Ms. Ferreira. Renee was not present. She had refused to attend after Bryce's interview. Ferreira opened by presenting her findings. Inconsistent statements from Walt and Diane. Bryce's admission. Mrs. Ferris's witness account. School counselor documentation spanning 6 months. Hospital records confirming Ivy's injuries. My father tried to interrupt twice. Both times, Dunbar put a hand on his arm. The third time, my father couldn't hold it. "This is a family matter. You're turning a discipline issue into. Mr. Carlson, an 8-year-old was hospitalized with hypothermia. This is a child welfare matter." My mother started crying, quiet tears that ran down the lines in her face. "We love Ivy. We made a mistake, one mistake." I looked at her across the table, kept my voice level. "You said if I'd been here, none of this would have happened, but I trusted you to be here for her. That was my only mistake, and I won't make it again." Marsh opened my folder. Family care plan revocation already filed. Request for sole custody review submitted to family court. Documentation of the $1,350 per month my parents had received for child care. All of it on the record. My father stared at the stack of paperwork. You're going to throw your own family away over this. You threw my daughter into a storm, Dad. I'm building her a roof. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Ferreira delivered the preliminary findings at the end of the meeting. Substantiated report of child neglect against Walt and Diane Carlson. Recommendation: no unsupervised access to Ivy Carlson pending comprehensive review. All future contact to occur at a monitored visitation facility, bi-weekly, 2-hour sessions. Marsh confirmed. Family care plan officially revoked. Ivy's legal guardianship reverted to me. The custody order would be formalized through family court within 30 days. My father stood up. His chair scraped the floor. His hands were shaking again, the same way they had at the hospital, the same tremor that started in his fingers and worked its way to his wrists. Bridget, she's my granddaughter. She is, and that's exactly why this has to happen. My mother reached across the table for my arm. Her fingers brushed my sleeve. I gently pulled my hand away. Not fast, not angry, just a boundary. Mom, I love you, but loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt your child. She pulled her hand back and pressed it against her mouth. Dunbar stood and gathered his papers. He looked at my parents with the face of a man who knew his clients had no defense. He shook Ferreira's hand, nodded at Marsh, and guided Walt and Diane toward the door. My father stopped in the doorway. He turned back, opened his mouth. Then he looked at the table where the paperwork sat, the revocation, the custody request, the witness statements, the hospital records, and closed it. He left without saying another word. My mother followed him. The door clicked shut. I walked out of the CPS office into a hallway that smelled like floor cleaner and burnt coffee. Ivy was in the lobby. Marsh's paralegal, a young sergeant named Nash, had been reading her a book from the waiting room shelf, something about a dog who lost his bone. Ivy looked up when she heard my footsteps. She slid off the chair and ran to me. Her arms went around my waist. She pressed her face into my jacket. Are we going home? Yes, baby, we're going home. She pulled back and looked up at me. Our home. Our home. I took her hand. Her backpack hung from one shoulder. I could see the edge of the military-dependent ID card still clipped to the inside pocket. The same card I'd put there the night before I deployed. I had put that card on her because I trusted my parents to keep her safe. But when the system failed and the people failed and the storm came, that small piece of plastic with my name on it was what brought her back to me. Not my parents, not my sister. A laminated card and a nurse who dialed the number on the back. We walked out into the parking lot. The sun was out. First clear day in a week. I didn't look back. 3 months later, Ivy and I were living on base at Fort Riley. Small apartment, 2 bedrooms. Her room had lavender curtains she picked out herself and a desk where she drew every evening after dinner. I had been reassigned to a desk position, logistics coordination, stateside, no deployments for at least 12 months. My commander signed off without hesitation. Family court had formalized the custody order in April, sole physical and legal custody to me. My parents were granted supervised visitation, 2 hours every other Saturday at a monitored facility 20 minutes from their house. A social worker present for every visit. The first visit was in May. My father brought Ivy a coloring book, horses and flowers. He set it on the table between them and sat down in a plastic chair. He didn't know what to say. Ivy didn't either. They colored together for 45 minutes. My father asked her about school. She told him about her art class. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't mention Bryce or Renee or the necklace or the storm. When the 2 hours ended, he stood up and said, I'll see you in 2 weeks, Ivy. She said, Okay, Grandpa. He walked out to the parking lot and sat in his truck for 10 minutes before driving away. I know because the social worker told me. Renee had not contacted me since the CPS meeting. Craig, her husband, came back from his oil rig rotation and had to be told the full story. They enrolled Bryce in counseling per CPS requirement. Bryce sent Ivy a handwritten note that arrived in June. I'm sorry I lied about the necklace. I hope you're not mad. Ivy asked me if she had to write back. I said it was her choice. She wrote back 3 days later. It's okay. I hope you're doing better. My mother called me every Sunday evening. The conversations were short. How is Ivy? She's doing well, Mom. Can I send her something? You can send it to our address. Bridget, The schedule is set, Mom. We'll see you on Saturday. My father's hands still shook when he saw Ivy at the visitation center. I didn't know if it was guilt or fear or something he didn't have a name for yet, but he sat in that room for 2 hours every other Saturday, and he never raised his voice. He never said lying granddaughter again, not once. I used to think protecting my daughter meant making sure she had a roof and food and people around her. I was wrong. Protecting her meant making sure the people around her deserved to be there. And when they didn't, it meant having the courage to be the one who said enough. Not with a scream, not with revenge, just with the truth, a stack of paperwork, and a mother who finally came home. That is my story. One storm, one lie, and one mother who came home just in time. If this reminded you that protecting your child is never overreacting, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Velmora Tales, where every story explores the messy, complicated, unforgettable side of family. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.